Where will the underrated gems of NFL free agency land this offseason? What's going on, BLV football fans? It's Mitch back here with another free agency predictions video. In this video, my landing spot for 35 underrated, undervalued, slipping under the radar free agents this offseason. My destination for the gems of NFL free agency. If that sounds good, don't forget to Gronk spike the like button. Let me know in the comment section below your opinion on the destination for each free agent. And subscribe for more NFL free agency predictions, reactions, just like this. Let's kick it off at the running back position. Zack Moss, I have signing with the Las Vegas Raiders. He's reminiscent in terms of skill set to both Zamir White and Josh Jacobs. Jacobs, I believe, will leave the Raiders, given where they're at in terms of quarterback, status of the team, and the timeline. It doesn't make sense for Jacobs to stick around in the prime of his career. He's probably going to want to go to a team with a better quarterback situation, a better overall team, and Moss could be a nice little replacement to pair up with Zamir White. Two sledgehammers, two power runners, two bigger backs, not super explosive, but bringing toughness and grit to the backfield, which is exactly what Antonio Pierce is looking for in his Raiders. Amir Abdullah re-signed as the third down pass catching back, so I'm not too concerned about that role. Moss would just make a really nice, cheap replacement for Josh Jacobs. Had a career season with the Colts last year and could cash in just a little with the Raiders. J.K. Dobbins is undervalued because of his injury history. He went pretty high in the draft once upon a time. He's been very effective when on the field. Yards per carry through the roof. He's explosive. He's got a great balance and tough nature to his running. And I think that fits New England. New England is going to be morphing the way they run the football, the scheme of their offense. But what they do need is veteran experience behind Ramondre Stevenson. And Dobbins is one of those home run potential steal signings that you could make to complement Ramondre, take the load off Ramondre, with potentially a guy that not a lot of people want to pay because he's been hurt. But if you're the Patriots, why not go for an explosive element to your backfield? You don't have a lot of speed. You don't have a lot of home run ability. Why not? It's like not going to hurt you at all. This guy's not going to be getting a ton of money because of the injury history. So for me, Dobbins makes a classic Bill Belichick signing, a classic Patriots signing. They used to make these moves all the time. I hope that the new regime learns something from that in particular and takes a chance on somebody like J.K. Dobbins, especially at the point where they are as a franchise. Just take a little chance with very little risk. Moving to the wide receiver position, KJ Osborn is one of my favorite underrated receivers. He is gritty. He does the gritty work of an offense. He's a good blocker in the run game. He's good over the middle of the field. He can take a hit. He's really smart. He's got high football IQ to find the soft spots in the zone coverages. And I think he makes a perfect fit for the Atlanta offense, right? Think about it. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. Osborn played there in that system, already, has familiarity, had success there. Osborn has been a pretty underrated player and has been overshadowed by Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson. His productivity has not been high because of it. But whenever he gets on the field, he is achieving. So you put him in Atlanta, maybe as the number 2 or number 3. More likely he's a good number 3. And he could be a chain mover. He's pretty good after the catch. I like a lot of things about Osborn that make him a fit for Zach Robinson's new offense in Atlanta. So that is a wide receiver signing for the Falcons to complement Drake London. Noah Brown replacing Tyler Boyd in Cincinnati. Not a lot of logic other than Noah Brown is a slot receiver. Noah Brown actually showed a hint of explosiveness last season that we didn't think he had. Like in Dallas, he was like this short little route runner, move the chains guy, caught like 6 passes every once in a while in a game, just popped up like Cole Beasley for Dak. But then he went to Houston and he started, running these crossers and these deep in routes and like off-play action. It was super effective and super efficient for CJ Stroud and very reliable. And he would make a great number 3 for very cheap, maybe a 1-year, maybe a 2-year deal in Cincinnati to just replace Tyler Boyd as a reliable slot receiver who can bring maybe not the size that Boyd brings, but really savvy route runner, really smart at, finding those leverage spots on those crossers, really good on option routes underneath. So a lot of elements that I think make sense on top of the fact that Zack Taylor and Bobby Slowick, there's some Shanahan McVayness to it. So I like the fit with Noah Brown there as a number 3 in Cincinnati. Curtis Samuel to the Giants. Love Curtis Samuel. I think every time I watch him, I feel like he's just underrated. I watch him, I'm like, this guy is good. I don't understand. Right? And in Washington, he's super quick, super twitchy, super fast. He can bring an explosiveness to an offense. So any team that needs explosiveness, any team that uses their receivers in a lot of different ways could use Curtis Samuel. And Brian Daboll is one of those guys that could use him on jet sweeps, could use him on the screen game, could put him at running back, could put him outside. I mean, Curtis Samuel can do all of these things. He's a good deep route runner. He's good after the catch. He's going to bring an explosiveness to an offense and a playmaking to an offense that desperately needs it, especially if they lose Saquon. So Curtis Samuel is one. He's also, I think, from Brooklyn, so he has ties to New York. I think Curtis Samuel is going to be a gem that if he finds the right fit, he'll be a lot better than people assume. Darnell Mooney to the Chiefs. This just makes too much sense. Matt Nagy is in Kansas City. I think the best season that Darnell Mooney ever had was under Matt Nagy, if I'm not mistaken. And Mooney would just bring an element to the Chiefs that they desperately need. A quick, fast, vertical receiver that can make plays down the field. And with Andy Reid, he's really good at finding these smaller, maybe like wiry receivers like Mooney, Hardman, Hill, and being able to align them in such a way where they can kind of get off press coverage, get down the field quickly, and be able to just burn people down the field. Like, imagine those 0 blitzes that Miami sent at Mahomes. Could you not see Mooney making those MVS-type plays against Baltimore or against Miami that, MVS was making? Mooney could make those, but at a different level, maybe speedy, to the house, like, type of plays. Like, Mooney is a good player. Mooney's underrated. Mooney has gone through some stuff with Justin Fields where Fields is just missing the guy constantly. He's rather open. He doesn't see him, or he's missing him just with the throw. So Mooney's gone through some stuff the last couple of years, but I think he's a much better player than given credit for. And I think the Chiefs would realize that and sign him up to a short-term contract with high reward. Next, Kendrick Bourne will remain a Patriot. I just think he has too much of a tie to the fan base. The fans love him in New England. The last couple of years, he's been one of the bright spots in terms of personality, in terms of through the darkness, he has been a bright light. And I love him personally. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a very good player. I think he's been arguably their most explosive receiver for the past 3 years. And he was their best receiver last year when he was on the field. He's going through an injury, so perhaps you could get him back a bit cheaper. The other thing I like about Bourne, he's got inside-outside versatility. He's good after the catch. He's actually deceptively strong at the catch point. And he brings energy to a team that needs it in this rebuilding phase. He's going to remain positive. He's going to remain a leader. And that's something New England needs. And he's just somebody that can play in any offense. Like, he's played in Shanahan's offense. He's played in McDaniel's offenses, 2 polar opposite offenses, and been successful. So now that they're going to a new system, it would make sense to have a guy that is just good no matter what. Next, Mike Gesicki. My only tight end, I believe, on this list, former Patriot, former Dolphin, to the Seattle Seahawks. I really like this idea of putting Mike Gesicki, a big move tight end who is basically a slot receiver, but just huge, in Seattle, where he could be like the 4th or 5th receiving option to Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf. You can move him around within this new offense that they're going to be running, which is, from, I believe, Washington, the college, not the Commanders, and having a lot of spread sets, having potentially a lot of 4 receiver, 3 receiver, 1 tight end formations where potentially you've got 2 slot receivers out there, maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba's in one, Mike Gesicki's in the other, and you can make plays down the field. He's I think a deceptively good route runner. I think he's big target in the red zone. And they could use a guy other than DK Metcalf that could go up and get those contested targets. They need a tight end desperately. They don't have one. No offense, a free agent. Doesn't really feel like this new offense will need much from blocking from the tight end. So that's why Mike Gesicki makes a lot of sense. Jermaine Eluemunor signing with the Cincinnati Bengals. I just think this is a really good fit. I think a more logical fit would be the Giants, just due to he's from New York and he's worked under that O-line coach, all that sort of stuff, or New England. But the Bengals would be perfect. And I know about the Bengals that they like specific type of linemen. They like power linemen. They like big linemen. They like the ability to overpower you, to anchor in pass protection. And they have commonly gone after Chiefs big guy, Orlando Brown, Ted Karras of the Patriots, Alex Kappa of the Bucks, similar type of players. Jermaine Eluemunor is in that mold of the Raiders and the Patriots and the Ravens, where he's been a power downhill lineman. He's been a super underrated pass blocker. He honestly has been a better player than Jonah Williams, probably for the last 2 to 3 years, and consistently on the field. He's been really solid for the Raiders in a starting right tackle role. Before that, he was really solid with the Patriots. He's just a good player and underrated, and he deserves, a little bit more recognition, but I think he could get a 2-3 year deal with Cincinnati to protect the right side for relatively cheap, and you'd be able to save a lot of money by letting go of Jonah Williams for Cincinnati. So this would shore up their offensive line and that right side in protection. Kendall Lamm to the Jets. He was pretty good, replacing the injured members of the Miami offensive line. I can't really point out one because there were so many. But Kendall Lamm played at a couple different spots, mostly, I believe right tackle when he was in and active. But he could be a solid swing tackle and a reliable option, or maybe even a low-key starter. He's kind of like a bridge tackle, so to speak, where he's like a borderline starter / a high-end backup. But last year, he was graded as a top 50 tackle in football. I believe he's played in Tennessee previous to playing in Miami. And there is some crossover in terms of zone blocking schemes in New York, in Miami, in Tennessee. So this seems to have a good fit and connection to what he's good at and talented at. So I think the Jets will want to stock up on linemen, and Lamm is the type of guy that would give you a high floor if for whatever reason your left or right tackle get injured, or if you're developing a rookie at one of those spots. Next, Greg Van Roten of the Giants, or going to the Giants and signing with the Giants. He played for the Raiders last year, but with the coaching turnover and the scheme turnover of Luke Getsy now coming in for a McDaniel-centric offense, I think Van Roten will likely leave, and I think that the Giants would be a good spot. He's from, I believe, New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. Brian Daboll has coached him before in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken either. And then also he has worked under the offensive line coach of the Giants. So there's a lot of crossover there and a lot of carryover and a reason for Van Roten to go back home, essentially, with the Giants. So they need guards. I think both their guard spots are pretty open and available. He would be relatively cheap due to his age and his lack of consistency. Last year was his best season of his career, actually grading 7th at the guard position among all guards in the NFL. So that's pretty impressive stuff. He might be peaking right now in his mid-30s, which sometimes does happen with certain linemen, but he would be a good fit with a team that just needs a solid floor at the guard position in New York. Jon Runyan of the Packers signing with the Raiders. This is a Luke Getsy connection. Runyan obviously saw, Getsy in the building, and Getsy probably saw Runyan in his offense in some regard from Green Bay as a younger player. And now that he's available, it would be a clear fit with the Raiders. And I think Runyan has performed better. Last year was not his best season, but I feel like years previous, he was really good. I think he was even a borderline Pro Bowler, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. So he's a pretty good player. Certainly has more upside than he showed last year. I don't think he's super old yet. I think he's about 27, 28 off the top of my head. So it would make a good fit for a team like the Raiders that maybe is not looking to break the bank on offensive line, but certainly has an offensive line need. Certainly has some turnover incoming to that offensive line due to the drastic scheme change that you would expect to happen. So there's a lot of reasons why you would think, a guy like Runyan who could sign like a 2 or 3 year pretty cheap contract and getting the offensive coordinator familiar with some of those linemen would make a lot of sense. Lloyd Cushenberry of the Broncos had his best season of his career last year, grading as a top 15 center in football. And the Titans desperately need a center. Aaron Brewer will most likely leave, which I'm actually going to discuss him in a second. Cushenberry's on the rise. He's still very young, in his mid-20s, and I think that he would be a solid fit for a team like the Titans. They're looking to rebuild this offensive line, throw resources at it. They've got new coaching for the offensive line. He would obviously be somebody that could also activate the running game, which he was very effective at last year, and then also help out a young quarterback, Will Levis, with protections and things of that nature. Pairing a young center that's on the rise with a quarterback that is young is a wise move and investment, in my opinion. Cushenberry to the Titans. Aaron Brewer to the Jets. Aaron Brewer is a downhill, tough, run-blocking center. Going to the Jets would make sense to unlock Breece Hall up the middle. They certainly need a center. I think they're going to move Tippmann to the guard position. So they probably can't spend a ton at center either, which is also something you have to kind of think about because they don't have a ton of cap space. And Brewer is one of those guys that played pretty well last year, is not going to get the most money on the market. Maybe you get him on a 1, 2, maybe at the most 3-year deal. He's not super old. He's tough, he's gritty, he's physical, fits the AFC East, fits that weather, fits that style of play. Makes sense for a team like the Jets. Also, Tennessee, New York, crossover in terms of, I feel like, blocking schemes. Teair Tart. This is the first defensive player. To the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have the specific role within their defensive line of big defensive tackle, and Tart fits that perfectly. I understand he was released from the Titans and then signed by the Texans at a point during last season, but he's been an underrated player pretty much everywhere he's gone, a pure run stuffer. And so the Chiefs have been looking for that guy. Nandi is a free agent. I don't know how much longer you can continue to have Mike Pennell on your practice squad and continue to pull him up to games. So Tart, just signing him up, making him like the nose tackle, D tackle / type of guy, and having him be, okay, on rundowns, he comes in the game, in clear running formations and situations he plays. That's the type of guy that usually Spags will feature in some sort of role and will be very specific for certain games, like the Super Bowl against the Niners. Tart would be made for that type of game. Javon Kinlaw to the Colts. I think the Colts have a fetish for 49er D linemen, DeForest Buckner, Ebukam. So Kinlaw might be the next in line. He also seems to fit that defensive tackle mold of what the Colts are looking for and could be a solid replacement or addition to the Colts, depending on what happens with Grover Stewart. But Kinlaw's more talented on the rise in terms of pass rushing. He had, in my opinion, his most consistent and best season of his career this past year. He showed flashes in big games this past season, and at times was more impressive than guys like Chase Young and even at times Javon Hargrave on this defensive line. So Kinlaw certainly feels like a guy that is just inching towards getting there. And that is the type of player that I feel like the Colts have always tried to target as somebody they want to sign. So there's a lot of different reasons. He fits the defense of Gus Bradley. He is a Niner, which they seem to like a lot. And he is a former first-round pick with a lot of upside that they could potentially continue to unlock. Maurice Hurst to the Chargers. Maurice Hurst went to Michigan. Jim Harbaugh coached Michigan when Hurst was there. Hurst was a pretty well thought of prospect at the time, but he had some issues in terms of just overall career, whether it was off the field, injury, whatever it was. But Hurst has kind of bounced around, and he's been a member of the Raiders. He went, I remember, later than people projected in that draft, went to the Raiders, showed some flashes. Then he went to, I believe, the Niners, didn't really do much, was kind of a depth piece for them. Then he went to, this past season, the Browns, and he was really interesting, really good player, really good situationally as a pass rusher. And he's got really good talent level where you could maybe unlock that. And a team that maybe doesn't have a lot of cap space, but is looking to shoot for upside and is looking for starters on their D-line, Maurice Hurst is that exact example of somebody that the Chargers could sign and potentially get a gem in free agency. The coach knows him. He'll fit the defensive scheme that they're trying to run because much of it is from Michigan itself. And Hurst is just now, it feels like, getting his game in the NFL. Last year was a really impressive outing for him in Cleveland. So Maurice Hurst to the Chargers. Dorance Armstrong to the Raiders. This one is a bit out there and a bit of a flyer, but the Raiders need a pass rusher on the opposite side of Max Crosby, and Dorance Armstrong's been super underrated for the Cowboys. I think he had 7 sacks last year. He is deserving of a starting role on a defense. DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons have largely taken that from him, but Armstrong has been in a strong rotation with that D-line for the last couple of years. He's more of a pass rushing specialist than he is a pure run defending setting edge, but they had like Kuntz starting, for them last year. So Armstrong fits the same mold of like a quick finesse, twitchy pass rusher, but I feel like he brings a little bit more in terms of size and length to the table like Max Crosby. So I feel like Armstrong would be a really nice compliment. I know that they drafted a guy last year in the first round, but I still think investing money into the D-line would be wise for the Raiders to do. Kyle Van Noy will find his way back to the Ravens. I just couldn't find a team that I felt comfortable with projecting for Kyle Van Noy. I thought about Seattle because obviously the defensive coordinator of the Ravens is now the head coach of the Seahawks, and because of how well Van Noy, really played, it feels like that's a good location. But it also feels like Van Noy is going to try to go to a contender. And I thought about specific contenders, and honestly, the defensive schemes don't really seem to fit. Maybe the Chiefs, but I don't know. I couldn't really find one. Maybe the Bengals, but Van Noy in Baltimore, he just played so well for them. And I think the fan base enjoyed his efforts. I think the coaching staff, other than McDonald, enjoyed his efforts. And they could get him for cheap. He wants to win. He wants to be in a location where it's going to be successful and it has a strong culture. And he wants to play, and he's going to do all those things with Baltimore. So it just makes sense for him to stay. Anfernee Jennings re-signing with the Patriots. He was one of the most underrated edge players in the NFL last year, one of the best run defenders at this position in football, extremely strong at the point of attack, really powerful. He just stands people up. And then he's also got the hybrid nature to drop back into coverage. He's a perfect Gerard Mayo addition and keeper for this defense. Andrew Van Ginkel, who I also thought about going to the Patriots here because he tried out for the team last year and had like a little bit of a workout for them. But I love his addition in New York, potentially. He is a guy that they could really use on the opposite side of the young kid Thibodeau, and they need a number 2. And Van Ginkel was a supremely good number 3 for Miami and had a breakout season for the Dolphins. And at times, he was their best defensive players in certain games. I mean, he was unbelievable in certain games. Strip sacks, just getting around the edge, dipping around the corner and getting to quarterbacks. Off of blitzes and stunts, he was very effective. He's a smart, high IQ player with really deceptive athletic traits. You look at him and he kind of looks like a special teamer, but this guy's good, and he's got a lot of good pass rushing ability, and this is the type of stand-up outside linebacker that the Giants could really utilize in their defense that's now going to be looking like the Titans of the past. So, feels like a fit for me. Derek Barnett to the Titans. Derek Barnett is a Tennessee legend. The Titans are going to be shifting and changing the identity of their defense. I think Derek Barnett will want to go back to where, his college career was. Like, that would make a lot of sense for him personally. He was very good, I felt like, in a role for the Texans, and he really stood out in a number of games. And I think he could be a nice situational pass rusher for them, a nice role player for them. He's fundamentally sound. He sets the edge well, and he's just a really good, savvy defensive end when it comes to finding the quarterback. And Derek Barnett to the Titans as a situational third defensive end would do a lot of damage. Mike Dana to the Detroit Lions. Mike Dana, I believe, is from Michigan, so that helps. But this is the type of player that I think fits the Lions system perfectly, and I think he would probably be one of their starters on their defensive line opposite Aiden Hutchinson. They could certainly use an upgrade, but I don't necessarily think they're going to go out there and try to break the bank for one of these guys. Dana's super underrated, and he brings a lot of versatility. He's also very strong in terms of his power. He's a power player, which I think the Lions look for in their edge rushers. He's not the bendiest guy in the world, but he's actually really twitchy in terms of his ability to get inside and create havoc, whether it's from interior pressure or from the edge. And he's a very sound run defender as well. So this is a guy that's more than a situational defender. I think he could be a starter on a pretty deep D-line for the Lions moving forward. Emmanuel Ogbah to the Vikings. Ogbah, I've always been a fan of. I like the fact that he's been in an incredible amount of systems, whether it's been 4-3 defensive end or stand-up 3-4-esque type of edge rusher. He was most effective, though, in my opinion, in Miami with Brian Flores. So I think if the Vikings aren't going to re-sign Danielle Hunter, they also have DJ Wonnum, who is a free agent. So a guy like Ogbah would be a safe addition to a defense that he understands, that he knows, that he's really effective in. He's got great length. He's got good first step ability. And he's that length, that ability to come in on a blitz and sack that quarterback and grab him, that ability to grab a guy around the edge and hold a tackle up at the same time and be able to set the edge is effective in Flores' defense. And the ability to bat down passes, if you're a free rusher and the quarterback sees you coming, that's really effective. So he's just really good in Miami's defense when Flores was there. I think he would be a great one-year addition and probably prove it type of deal because he didn't play enough, in my opinion, in Miami, just because they tried to get Bradley Chubb. And then the turnover of the coaching staff. There's a lot of reasons, but he's super undervalued for a reason. Next up, DJ Wonnum, who I think will be replaced by Emmanuel Ogbah, will go to the Panthers. I think Wonnum is from Carolina. I try to find hometowns. I try to find it when it works, and they definitely need a guy other than Brian Burns. But I don't think that the marquee players are in their price range or really willing to go to Carolina. Like, Carolina is a place where you're going to have to overpay a second-tier free agent if you want them, and Wonnum was somebody that had 7 or 8 sacks. He seems to fit the profile of what Evero looks for in his type of defensive ends, and yeah, I just feel like would be a solid number 2 to a marquee number 1. And Carolina didn't have that last year, hasn't had that in a while. So he would definitely upgrade that spot. That's a crucial spot in that defense. Tyrel Dodson, the Buffalo Bill to the Tennessee Titans. I think he's from Tennessee. Again, I'm trying to play into the hometown thing. It doesn't always work, but it works when it works. And Azeez is probably going to be gone. I believe Azeez Al-Shaair, who was their middle linebacker and starting marquee linebacker of the defense last year. I think that Dodson could take over, and he's a little bit smaller in stature. I just lost the graphic, but we're going to continue. Okay, there it is. Tyrel Dodson. So he's a little bit smaller, but he's quick. He's nasty. He's feisty. And like Azeez, he plays similar. He's downhill. He goes after it. He's going to shoot the gap and make a play. And he's pretty fluid in coverage as well. So this is a guy that he actually looks a lot bigger than I feel like on TV. He looks bigger to me than he is, I guess. But he was one of the most underrated linebackers in football last year. Kind of came out of nowhere. He's the type of signing where a lot of teams might be hesitant because was that really the real him last year? Or was it the scheme? Was it the team? Was it the year? Whatever. So regression could be coming. But for a team like Tennessee that's kind of rebuilding, retooling, they could take a chance on this guy. And he could really be a good linebacker for them in their new defense. Blake Cashman, I think, will remain a Houston Texan. He was just too good for them last year. He's quick. He's fast. He's explosive as a linebacker. He's a great athlete and made a ton of plays. He was one of the most undervalued linebackers in football last year. He's a good special teamer as well. He's just going to provide a lot of stability and depth, and he's a great fit for D'Amico's defense. Taki. I got going to the Commanders. He is the type of linebacker that seems to fit Dan Quinn's type of style of defense, right? He was initially drafted for that type of Seattle-style defense in Cleveland, and now I feel like he might depart. But he's solid in coverage. He's a solid all-around linebacker, a good, sound tackler, and I feel like Washington needs help at linebacker. But they're probably not going to want to break the bank because Dan Quinn's defenses, they typically don't spend a lot at that position. So this guy that can move in space and cover in zone, but also, has enough range to play the run, makes sense for me in this spot. Chidobe Awuzie to the Panthers. I almost went with the Broncos here, but Awuzie would make a very nice number 2 for J.C. Horn, which they really need. Awuzie was one of the best corners in the NFL in 2021. He got hurt in 2022. In 2023, he played kind of hit and miss. He got hurt at times, but he's been dealing with injuries. But this is the type of, low risk, high reward signing that a team like Carolina should take a look at. He's good in both man and zone. He's well versed in a lot of different defenses. And I think he would upgrade the number 2 spot over Dante Jackson, who they've had for many years in Carolina. Ahkello Witherspoon. I think he remains in LA. He played like the 5th most snaps in the NFL at the corner position. So he's an outside perimeter guy with great length. He is a zone corner. I think they want to stay mostly zone heavy with this defense. I think Ahkello Witherspoon is solid. I don't think he's a great number 1 at all. I think he's more of a number 4, really, in an ideal world. But he can get away with being a number 2. He can play press coverage because of his length, and he covers a lot of ground. This guy looks really big at the corner position, and he had a rough moment through a year or 2 in his career, but he seemed to really find a home in LA. So I think they keep him. He won't be very expensive. Keyshawn Nixon. Love this player. Great special teamer. Great returner. I think that in itself is worthy of re-signing for the Packers. He is valuable in that regard. A team that's often been criticized for their lack of special teams, just want to. But he's also developed into a pretty solid, feisty nickel corner who also has shown that he can play on the outside a little bit. So he just continues to develop as a Packer. This feels like a guy that I would want to keep on my team. He's shown versatility. He's shown commitment. He's shown progression. And he's valuable on special teams. So Nixon, he won't break the bank. He'll be just a nice little addition. And you could maybe even bring in another nickel corner for competition, another corner for perimeter. But he would be great as a number 4 corner on a team like Green Bay, where he can fill in if your nickel guy goes down. He's also your returner. He can play in certain packages with a lot of defensive backs. He can do a lot of different things. He's a great athlete. There's a lot of reasons to keep him. Teair Thomas, I believe is how you say his name. Maybe Teair, but Thomas is a perfect fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is a see the ball, get the ball, pursue type of nickel back. He's primarily played in the nickel for the Browns and now the Texans. The last couple of years, he's been one of the most underrated nickel corners according to Pro Football Focus's grading. The last couple of seasons, he's split time primarily with Desmond King, but D'Amico Ryans really likes this guy. He has a lot of the elements that the Steelers look for in a nickel corner when they had Mike Hilton, right? A guy that can tackle, a guy that's great around the line of scrimmage, a guy that can blitz, that can do a lot of different things. So Thomas is my nickel of choice for the Steelers. Jordan Fuller is going to stay a Ram. He is valuable for them. He is great in coverage, extremely smart, a good leader, and everything they've wanted out of him, he has become. He is a sound tackler. He's always in the right spot. He's one of those players. The Rams will keep him. Julian Blackmon, I think, will re-sign with the Colts, although I considered a lot of different destinations. The Bears with Eberflus, the Seahawks in McDonald's defense, the Packers even. But Blackmon actually changed positions, I felt like, last year. He played more of a deep safety role, but he has like the ability to play both. Right, so that's the thing I like about Blackmon. He's a really downhill, strong, like pursuer of the ball. He's not scared. He'll tackle. He'll hit somebody. But he's also rangy enough to play free safety. He could play in the slot as well. He kind of moves everywhere, and I think Gus Bradley figured out how to use him last year pretty effectively. And the final one is Alohi Gilman, who played for the Chargers last year. I think he'll sign with the Seattle Seahawks. I love his range. I love his smarts in coverage, and he's just always one step ahead of the offense. He feels like a guy that in McDonald's defense would thrive and potentially get a lot of interceptions because he's one of those guys that can understand a lot of defensive concepts, understand a lot of coverages, understand why they're doing a lot of rotations. He played in Brandon Staley's defense, which did a lot of that safety rotation stuff, 2 high, 1 high, what are we playing, this type of stuff. McDonald likes to play a lot of 2 high, rotate, and do that sort of stuff. So Gilman makes a lot of sense for the free safety role, complementing Julian Love as the strong safety in Seattle. That's it. Those are my underrated gems of free agency and where I think they will sign. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's Mitch. Gronk spike the like button, subscribe, and thank you for all your support on the free agency predictions. Let me know yours in the comment section below. Peace.